Good evening, welcome. My name is Mackenzie Wilson. You're tuned into another episode of Alberta Shoptalk, the only show dedicated to Alberta landlords. Tonight, I'm flying a bit solo. Chris was here 3 minutes ago and can't get his mic working, so he'll be spectating tonight and probably dropping in some comments. But that is okay because I've got two awesome guests lined up for you. As always, coming from Central Alberta, our preferred partner, Andrea Warkentin. She's tuning in tonight with us, and a new landlord guest speaker coming in, Julia Pereira. She's in actually Vancouver, and she's got some rentals here in Alberta, as well as rentals spread across BC. And that will be the focus of tonight's show: is that challenging or that decision to make to have properties that are not local, they're out of town, out of city, you're not remote. How do you manage them? The pros and cons, and working through those challenges when you're not local to the property. So let's get into it. Let's bring my lovely ladies online. So here is Andrea and here is Julia. How you guys doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, this is a speedy introduction. I didn't really beat around the bush, but yeah, let's kind of get into it. So first things first, let's do a couple of introductions for the people that don't know who you ladies are. Andrea, go first, and then we'll go over to Julia.
Great, thanks. My name is Andrea Warkentin with Realty Experts Group in Red Deer, and I'm both a realtor and a licensed property manager, and we kind of serve within an hour drive of Red Deer. So that's me in a quick moment.
Perfect. And Julia, for the people that don't know who you are, who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Julia Pereira, and I am actually a healthcare professional by background and a real estate investor and mastermind facilitator in real estate for people who are 9-to-5 real estate investors.
Very cool. Very cool. So the conversation tonight is around not being local to the property, the challenges kind of surrounding that. I'll paint a bit of a picture here. When I first got into real estate, I considered doing this because certainly there's some greener pastures out there that may not be local to you when you're looking at cash flow and you're running the numbers. But there's also a lot of challenges that come along when the property is not local to you. A personal fear of mine was I was still learning the business, so I did not want to add any more complexity to the job of property management without really knowing the fundamentals first. So something that I actually shied away with when I first looked at getting into getting my own properties and investing. So I'll throw it to both of you guys. Maybe paint a picture of your experience with managing properties from afar, and then maybe we can talk about some of the common struggles that we might have. So Andrea, I think you kind of already painted the picture. You've got some properties as far as an hour drive away, and also you manage properties professionally. You're in the hundreds of doors right now. So how do you, as maybe on scale, manage the task of being remote from properties?
Well, that's a great question. I also actually own a property 4 hours away from me that I have somebody else manage for that very reason, because I'm so far away. So I've owned that property since probably 2008. It's in Southern Alberta, just outside of Lethbridge. So I have for many years had a property management company help me out there, and they were fantastic. So I don't think you have anyone in that area, do you, as a preferred partner?
Not right now. No, we've got Calgary, we've got yourself, and that's it. So if you want to give a shout out to the company, if they've been really good, let's hear who they are.
Yeah, so they're based out of Tabor, and they also have an office in Lethbridge, and they're called Renter's Choice, and they've been fantastic to deal with. So I'll just say that. Now, in my own experience managing as far north as Ponoka, as far east as Alex, as far west as Rocky Mountain House, and as far south as Innisfail, really the big thing comes down to finding local trades to help you when something goes wrong, because otherwise you're paying drive time for folks to head out.
Yeah.
And it gets costly pretty darn quick, especially if it's something like a furnace and they have to diagnose and then go back and get parts and then come back again. So definitely, if you're in a smaller center, things can be more costly on the repairs and maintenance. And overall, too, when you're doing showings, if you're driving 45 minutes to an hour or more, you really want to make sure people are coming to see you. So
absolutely,
definitely making sure you've got qualified people that you're coming to view the property. So we do a lot more asking of questions before we set up appointments that are that far out, because I want to know that I've got a really solid potential. And of course, grouping those showings as much as possible to be at the same time, so I'm not driving back and forth.
Okay, awesome. So Julia, I'll throw you the same question. Which now I lost my head, but we're talking about the challenges of managing from afar. Oh, your experience with it. So sorry, continue from your side.
Yeah, so like Andrea, I think Andrea just took a page right out of my book around the trades driving around. Yeah, that definitely is a concern. I think for me, one of the biggest focuses was my expectations. Understanding clearly what my expectations were of one, myself. Unlike Andrea, I property manage my own. And I have upwards of 3 hours, an hour and 40, and then a different province. And so having my own expectations of what how much I expect to be doing, and then also expectations around my tenants. So it's one thing to know what the tenant profile is that I want, but can my tenants do things that are going to make it easier for me? So a really quick kind of screen that kind of eliminates people with me is if they can't reply to an email, they can't, send me an e-transfer, they can't, their whole communication system is on voicemail, that's not going to work for me. So I actually so I'm an Apple user, and just one little example is my applications, my screening applications are on my my notes. I have a link to my Google Drive. I've created like my tenant application on my Google Drive, and I have a link on my notes. So anytime someone expresses interest, I automatically can send it to them as a text message. Those that reply and can give me the information on the application, these are the types of people that are going to work for me and make it easier for me, as opposed to someone who I have to be, chasing after to get the paperwork to me and that type of thing. And so that's an example when Andrea said really being certain about the tenant, so that you're not spending the time. I do when, just from a screening perspective, I do combined, showings. So when people are coming, I've got the appointments set up and stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome. And Julia, I think I want to highlight something you said that's really important that you do very well, is you've actually kind of built in a bit of a test or a filter in your own screening process by forcing the communication and some of the logistics of applying for the property are all digital or all online. So by that very nature, if they can't conduct their business online and operate within your system, they've already filtered themselves out by that very process. So I think that's a very ingenious way of keeping the business flowing very smoothly when you're not local, right? I would say I do similar things in the sense that I do have a Google link or a few links I send out for some applications and some other online stuff. And I'm very much the same way, being a background in IT. The less I can do in paperwork, phone calls, and checks, I do much better with. So
exactly.
Fantastic. Let's throw some shout outs here. Folks, if you tune in and say hi, we've got Christine watching. We've got Lewis watching as well. Thanks for tuning in. And then a face I haven't seen in a little while is Donna McGuire. So she said she tuned in just to say hi to my esteemed guests, Andrea and Julia. So very, very cool. And then we got Sean tuning in from Fort McMurray. So folks, thanks for joining us. I'm running double duty here, so I will work with the comments definitely, so keep them coming in. I just don't have my powerhouse, Chris, helping me out in the background here. So if you see my eyes twitching back and forth, I'm trying to multitask very poorly. So we'll keep this going. So, okay, both you ladies, you guys are managing properties from afar. Let's dive into the first question here. I was thinking is what was the first thing you guys both learned when you first started managing properties from afar? What was the first challenge you had to figure out? Or what was the first challenge you came across, and how did you figure it out or solve the problem? I will throw this back to Julia. We'll switch order. Julia, you go first.
Perfect. I think probably the greatest lesson learned was I had to 10x my organization. I had to be beyond organized. And aside from having the tenants' expectations, like can they send me pictures of what they're concerned about, or can they send me a video of the washer that's making the noise so that I can actually have something so I don't have trades going in so many times. The other thing was ensuring that I had all the data I needed. So not only do I have a tenant booklet that I've created that both is online and it's physically in the house. So I have a lot of the things to troubleshoot. Like let's say the washer dryer isn't working. Here are the things to troubleshoot. So I could actually work through it with them. Or vice versa. You know, when you call the trades and they're like, so what kind of a washer do you have? And you're like, I quickly learned that I needed all my serial numbers, the types of washers I had, the brands, all that kind of stuff. So getting all that up front paid off so much as the tenancy went on. So now it's like a standard. Awesome. Yeah, it's a standard in my system basically now.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. That having, you know, especially, and something that just comes with experience, right? Especially if you just got a new property, you might not know the nuances that are going to cause tenants some problems. But also, if you've cycled through a few tenants, you'll learn quickly. Okay, here's my top common questions. Here's the troubleshooting steps. I know one tip I picked up too was I love that you got that binder inside and a digital copy of it. Is telling tenants where the location of shut off water valves are, and maybe mark them with a red tag, because some of them, you know, again, living in a house is actually a skill set. It's not something we're all born with. So these things that we all take for granted who've owned our properties for years and years are not, unfortunately, common sense. So, you know, being a little more obvious and just clear and pointed does help get the message through. Andrea, what was your first learning point when you started with a remote property?
I think that it's really important to know your community. And so when you buy a property in a city that you don't live in, you need to know where the schools are, what's closest, what the garbage schedule is, who the local default utility providers are, because it can change, whether the city will allow or the town will allow the tenant to put a water bill in their name or not, or whether they need to contact them to email it. So it's just kind of learning about the town and what's close by, because in advertising, you know, certain people want certain things. And so if you're within walking distance of a K-7 school, that might work for some people, and other people don't like the busyness of being that close to a school or being close to their place of employment, as an example. So for us, it was kind of like, okay, it's great to buy in a new town, but what do I know about that town? What's there? What amenities are there, so that I can be prepared with my ad and my sales pitch as to why they should rent my property over somebody else's.
Yeah, I love that. So, you know, commonalities between both of what you guys just brought up for the first kind of hurdles is knowing what's coming out front, being clear with your processes, and really documenting well the challenges you'll expect your tenant to come up. And then, Andrew, to your point, saying, well, beyond that, with marketing, knowing what to offer and knowing the local rules. For example, in some cities, you can outsource the utility bills to the tenant. In other cities, it has to be in the owner's name. So those are small nuances that play a big role in being a property manager. So I love that. And I think the other thing too is I looked at this, and the reason I backed away as well as the places I wanted to invest in, I didn't have a network there established yet. And having trust with boots on the ground was probably my biggest, what would be the word for it? Not limiting, well, yeah, I guess limiting factor, or the reason why I chose not to go down that route. Along with, at this time, again, as a new landlord, I didn't want to make the job any more complicated than it already was, because I didn't know it. I knew I didn't know anything, if that makes any sense. So, yeah. So let's flip over to that stuff. So how do you guys deal with getting the trades and the local boots on the ground, someone you trust? How do you build up that trust if you don't know anyone in the area? Where do you start? And I'll start with you, Andrea.
Yeah, so if you've used a realtor that's familiar with that area, they're a great starting point. The neighbors are a great starting point. Phoning the town is fantastic, especially the smaller towns. You know, if you're in a village of less than 1,000 people, the lady that answers the phone can tell you a whole lot about the town because she knows everyone. And so quite often they're very happy to put a voice or a face to the name because they see the property turnover, right? So they would notice that the house was for sale and, oh, who's moving in, right? So you want to use, especially in those small towns or outlying areas, you want to use those local people and they will help you. So for example, in Nobleford, where I have my property, last time I was there, because I'm actually converting my duplex to a 16-unit apartment building, which is a big endeavor. But my local guy gave me 2 different builders to talk to. He gave me, a plumbing company to talk to. He gave me the people that would do the survey. Like they had not just one, but multiple referrals to give me, and they've been fantastic with helping me. And so, those people are great. When you go to a larger center like Red Deer or Lethbridge or something even larger than that, you find that there's not that same community feel that this person has a job and they're doing their 9 to 5, right? So they're maybe not as helpful. So it's, important to try and build some bridges and ask other investors. So oftentimes you can post on Facebook and say, hey, anyone have any tradespeople? And we see that on your page, right? On the Alberta community is great for that, referrals. So asking other investors, asking other landlords for referrals is usually a good way to find those people.
I love it. So quick takeaway is focus and communications with the locals. If it's a smaller community, find different ways to reach out, maybe call even the local municipality. If it's that small of a community, especially in that 1,000 to 2,000 number, a few phone calls will probably get you pretty far because there's only so many players in all the different trades in those kind of areas. So I love those good tips. Julia, how did you tackle that problem when you weren't local to your properties, and how did you get that established trust with someone local?
Yeah, so a lot of the same tactics in terms of Facebook, and my realtor was obviously my number one link, and was able to kind of introduce me to a few people. But I also spent time there. I spent some time initially in the area. I bought the place, actually, pretty much all of them. I bought them unseen. But then once they were purchased, the market and the analyzing was done well before in the due diligence process. But once they were purchased right out of the gate, there was some time spent literally in the area. And I can't stress enough what Andrea just said about getting to know the locals, like just even walking into the coffee shop and talking to the person in the coffee shop who also does Airbnbs. And then I'm like, oh, great. So you do rentals as well. And just getting the feel for, okay, what's been your successes, what hasn't, who have you used, who have you not? So those to me were more invaluable. And again, neighbors, were like everything to me. Because the neighbors I basically treated like my tenants. So when I was giving a present to my tenants at Christmas, the neighbors got something too. Because as much as they would tell me what was going on, the other part of it is they would, because I was showing them respect, they would basically respect the tenants. So even when there was 1 or 2 scenarios where maybe the music was too loud, it wasn't such a big deal. But also in terms of understanding what's going on in the city, one thing I used to do is, especially during COVID, the council meetings were being put online. So I would watch council meetings every other month or every few months just to kind of see what's going on, so that it did demonstrate to my tenants that I'm not that far-fetched from what's going on in the area. And, in a few occasions, there were some things around getting some rebates on efficiencies, which had I not have been listening to that, I wouldn't have gotten it. And I was able to kind of reach out to the tenants and say, hey, we're going to make this change and stuff. So it's definitely, I've had some situations where the handy person didn't work out. They maybe took advantage a little bit of the fact that I was not local. But you nip that in the bud and you move on to the next person, and it's okay. You just, again, it's that organization. You have to be really organized to organize your people so that they know where you're coming from, what you want, and, back and forth follow up.
Definitely. All right, I got two ways I want to take this conversation. So one, both you ladies highlight something really important. It is getting to know the locals and your neighbors. I cannot agree with you so much, 100%. Neighbors are your lifeboat. Even in Calgary here, where I'm only a 20-minute drive, it's still 20 minutes one way. And depending on the time of day, it could be longer if there's rush hour. So I just absolutely live by your neighbors are your customers. And if you treat them right like your tenants, not only will they not complain as much, but they'll actually look out on your behalf and look after your property. It's so crucial. So I make sure to give out a business card or all my contact information, do a very good, clear introduction, make it like just so they know who I am, explain to them, I accept any phone calls. I want to run a quality rental. If you see any problems, please let me know so I can address them very quickly. Also, my one neighbor, he's a retired fellow, doesn't have an income anymore. He's a little more thrifty these days. And he had called me up and noticed that I was cutting down a tree that was too large in the front yard of one of my rentals. So he had started talking, and I knew at this time, because I'd gone over and introduced myself, he has this huge rock kind of front landscaping garden thing going on. And he had mentioned previously that he wanted he needed long pieces of wood for something he was doing. So I had called the guy that was the contractor cutting my tree down, and he actually cut the lengths longer and dropped them off on his front lawn. The next couple hours later, I got a phone call from him. He was so excited because something he couldn't afford purchasing on his own, he'd got it, and now I've got an awesome ally to make sure my tenants are behaving well, or just maybe he sees damage on the property that my tenants don't think is a big deal, and he lets me know that it's something I can fix before it becomes a bigger repair issue. So I love that. And and the other way I want to take this conversation. So if we're dealing with trades remotely and we have to do a remote repair on a property, how do you guys, what process or how do you structure that service call so you can ensure the work's being done fairly and you're not being overcharged? Do you guys incorporate any sort of checks or balances in that process? So who wants to take this question first? Free for all. Go.
Okay, I'll do it.
All right, Julia.
So I once I've had that established relationship with my handyman, sometimes I'll send him in first and have him take a peek, especially if it's something more complex. And a lot of, again, as I mentioned earlier about my expectations, is I want to see pre and post. So either I'm on the video call with him and we're FaceTiming and he's walking me through it, or he's taking pictures before, this is what it looks like. And then I'm like, hey, now when you're done the work, take the pictures. And we do a bit of a check-in. I'm like, so when do you anticipate you're going to leave the site, or leave the home? Oh, I'm leaving at 4. About 4:30, I'm giving him a call and saying so how did it go today? So it does take a little bit of managing the trades and a little bit of following up. But that to me is not a very high price to pay for me to avoid a $200 ferry and 3 hours to get one way. So to me, that's easy.
Absolutely.
Something I can do when I'm driving. I just have to give myself extra reminders to kind of keep myself in check. If it's a more complex situation, I actually then would schedule it at a time where I can go down there. And then I'm physically there if it were something a little bit more in detail. But I once had a situation where a tenant's child kept playing with water and it was going onto the floor. And I guess over time, we ended up with a leak from upstairs to downstairs right into the lower unit. And I didn't have to step foot there. I was able to just be in enough communication with, and they already knew what I wanted to, what my expectations were to understand if the job was getting done or not. And we got it resolved and everybody was happy, including me.
Perfect. All right. And Andrea, what is your take on this? How do you get that trust with their trades and how do you put the checks and balances to make sure they're treating you fairly?
Yeah, so sometimes we get quotes from multiple people, first of all. And definitely over time, you kiss a few frogs before you find your prince or your princess or princesses. And so over time, we've built some very strong relationships. Now, because I'm looking after over 200 units, at some point you got to have, your regular handyman who can do most anything. And so over time, we've kind of cultivated these folks who are reasonably priced. So when we get the invoice, it makes sense to us. And so over time, we've kind of pared it down to a certain group of people that we continuously use over and over again. And so, some of my owners have preferred people that they have used in the past. So we use those people upon request of the owner, but otherwise we generally use our same core group of people. So if it's a plumber in Innisfail, I'm using a specific company. If it's a plumber in Ponoka, I'm using a specific company, Ponoka Plumbing. But if it's a furnace in Ponoka, I have to use somebody else because the Ponoka Plumbing doesn't do furnaces, right? So over time, you kind of cultivate those people, but it's good to kind of get a check every now and then and get a second quote from somebody else, especially if you're spending a lot of money, like replacing a furnace. You need to make sure, especially when I'm, spending other people's money, my owner's money, I need to make sure that they're getting good value for money. So that's kind of my commitment to my owners, is I don't want them opening up the bill and saying, Andrea, what happened?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want the paper shock or the sticker shock. So some things I think you ladies highlighted that are super important, I want to go back and just kind of draw attention to is one, Andrea, you mentioned get invoices or quotes from multiple sources. So if you're not familiar with that type of trade, you're going to get more than one invoice, because then you'll see the similarities and you'll see what they are talking is probably accurate, and then you can see the outliers as they are, and kind of cut through the BS on the pricing and things of that nature. If you're really new at it, you guys already mentioned this once, come on the Facebook community or in our Mighty Networks and ask the question, hey, I've gotten this quote, does this make sense? They said this and this for this much. Does that get validation on those numbers? Julia, what you did really well, I was super impressed, and I think that's a great idea, is you don't take the word for face value. You found different ways to have checks and balances in there by doing a Zoom call and seeing it before, or sorry, FaceTime call, walking through, seeing the problem that yes, in fact, there is a problem. It's not hearsay, and you're not just going to get a $200 bill for nothing. Also, you said take pictures before and after. I've heard the saying dollars for pictures. So you need proof that they've done the repair before and after before you give out the money. So,
and Mackenzie, may I add one thing? Another thing about the trades too is it's to me, it's a reciprocal relationship. Like I make sure that anyone that's from Afar, even like if the rental property is closest, is paying them as fast as possible, because they highlight, like for them, it's important, especially handymen or women who, they very much rely on that. So paying them as quick as possible, and like treating them like you treat the tenants, because I find that then I become their number one person. The other thing is don't be afraid to talk about your network. Hey, yeah, I have lots of other investors. I know other people who rent properties, because that's potential referrals for them. So it's a two-way street. It's what can I give them, so in exchange, I get what I need and everybody's kind of happy. So I think particularly with trades, because I can't stress enough, like Andrea, like once you get you're like, oh, I got to hang on to this person. You got to go a little bit above to make sure you're servicing them as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, being their first choice as a customer, you're gonna get that better service. So they're gonna drop things, and then potentially, a 2-hour difference when they show up could save you a whole lot of damage if you've got a potential leak or a flood going on. So, I fully agree with what you're saying there, Julia. We'll give some more shout outs here as I'm trying to segue back. Hey, Kimberly, she's watching from Lacombe, Alberta. And folks, if you haven't noticed already, we are in fact having issues with Facebook. So if people are asking on Facebook if someone could drop the message and share the link to the YouTube channel, because I just saw a bunch of comments come up that they lost their feed. So hopefully we can get these folks back on. Some technical issues out of our control. But
Mackenzie, I would mention something else that I think is really important. So through my property management business, I have owners that want things fixed, and they want it done as inexpensively as possible. Yes, very thrifty. Whereas I have other owners who look at an opportunity to upgrade the unit. So especially at tenant turnover time, I'll have owners that are like, okay, I've owned this building for like 10 years. And when I bought it, it was already kind of tired. So now that we had somebody move out, they'll replace the flooring or a new paint job, something like that. Whereas I have other owners who just want only the walls that need to be painted, meaning not every wall in every room gets painted, which is why we have a standard color, right? So we got to make it easy for our tradespeople. We have everything is standardized, everything. And that makes it easy because once your crew knows what your standard is, then it's fantastic. But when you're looking after multiple owners with different standards, you have to be very clear about what your expectation is, because that sticker shock may come into play if they were expecting just 4 walls to be done and somebody painted the entire apartment. There's a big price difference. So my advice is make sure you are extremely clear with what you are wanting to be done, what your budget is, especially if you're on a limited budget, and what the quality is. So I've been in fourplexes that have commercial grade carpet that is worn down to the nub. And I have other places that have this beautiful vinyl flooring. So 2 different standards, same installer, or same person looking at the property to contractor. So I think it's very important that if you are on the thrifty side, that you say, this is what my budget is. What can you do within my budget? If you're looking to do some upgrades on tenant turnovers, as compared to somebody who sees, maybe they're going to get their property reappraised. And so they want to show it as nice as possible, but also get higher rents. So then you need to do a little bit of work. So it's important to know what your plan is if you're going to be heading into a refinance, or if you're just wanting the property to be as efficient as possible with the least amount of money spent as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're juggling the game of juggling cash flow and your expenses versus the rent coming in, and then depending on where the age life expectancy of key components of that rental property are at, you got to make some decisions in here on what you're doing. So, but probably the biggest thing you said, Andrea, is setting that expectation up front, where one contractor comes in and gives you the Rolls Royce, and everyone comes in and gives you a more than functional Honda, which, depending, as us being investors, we want to be thrifty and make our ROI go as far as it can. So perfect. All right. Just going to throw up some more comments here. We got some folks tuning in. So Christine just mentioned it, 5-10 minutes ago, that we're talking about the neighbors. Absolutely huge difference. And then she also mentioned here, my contractors do before photos and photos during the job to keep me informed. That's good too. And you kind of mentioned that too, Julia, is understand their time frame, so you have a reasonable expectation of when that work should be done. And then when you can check in, if it's not making progress, you can nip it in the butt before it becomes a bigger problem. And then she likes to say, I'd like to see what's behind the walls. I totally missed the context on that, so I'm not even sure, but okay. And all right. I have, sorry, I'm trying to multitask now. I've lost a train of thought. Is there any other thoughts as we kind of talk about managing properties from the floor that we haven't brought up that you think is worth noting that you guys have learned from your experience?
I'll throw in this one. I was kind of forced into doing properties from afar, because where I live, the cash flow wasn't as lucrative, and that was at that time, that was my focus. And I think also when I did have to go out there, especially like, for instance, for myself, one of my homes being on the island, I made sure that I attached something to it at the end, so there was some kind of a reward, because it was a big commitment to go out 3 hours one way, 3 hours back, So, you know, I'd do something locally in between that made it fun, like jump on a snowboard and get to the local mountain before I came back. And just so that I could, like, you know, so that this isn't a thorn in my side, but rather it was also a way that I could enjoy kind of, you know, the fact that I had to leave the comfort of my four walls at home and everything is intact and whatnot. So yeah, so I definitely tried to be smart about it in that way. And then also when going away too, if it was summer, we'd camp. So we'd go camping, and we love camping. So we'd camp and then go over to the unit, do what we needed to do, if we did this summer, we did the deck, we painted the deck and stuff like that. And so, you know, mix it a little bit so that, you know, we're having some fun at the same time. Yeah, so it wasn't just work.
And I think that's brilliant, because on the side thing too, you know, let's get two birds with one stone here, get the work done, enjoy the trip. Also, you can write off that trip as part of your expenses, maintain the property, so you can get some benefits and maybe get, I'm not call it a free trip because you're still spending the money, but you're writing more of the expenses off than you normally would if it was just a pleasure trip, so to speak.
Right. Fair.
So there's those opportunities. And I did see a question earlier in the group here, so I'm going to go into that one. I think Lewis asked that here. He said, when it comes to signing leases or documents, either from faxing them, that's really old school, emailing them, any concerns of the validity of a signature if it ever was to go to court? So how do you guys sign your leases remotely? Maybe we'll ask that question.
Yeah. We use DocuSign. So DocuSign is legal, and you actually get a certificate that prints out that says date and time it was signed. So that's the easy way. And, you know, there's other electronic signatures out there besides DocuSign that are not as expensive or are free for a certain amount of signatures per month. And so use those tools to help your business. And, you know, another thing that we also require that if you're not doing, you should, is get people to text you or email you a copy of their photo ID. You need to confirm who you're actually renting to. And if you're not meeting these people in person, you should be collecting ID. And especially if you ever going to court, or if the using landlord credit bureau or anything, you need to know who you're renting to.
It's pretty difficult to chase people for money, do judgments, validate if you don't know who they are and you've never got the full information. You know what? You just made me think of this. To validate people's identity without ever meeting them in person is you want a copy of that government issued ID, and then you're going to hop on that Zoom, Facebook, whatever video call platform you choose, and make sure the person talking to you on the phone is who they are, they say. And you can kind of get away with doing that now without actually having to see the people in person. I think COVID's really taught us that, because this forced us really to do a lot more things differently. Virtual tools, for example. I mean, you mentioned, Andrea, at the beginning of the show here, how you want to really pre-qualify and do a lot of due diligence on that potential tenant before you drive that 45 minutes, or you pay someone remotely to do your viewings for you, that they are qualified and they are a good fit for your property. So
exactly. Let's talk about insurance quickly, because I think this is important. So when you're a long distance landlord, you need to make sure somebody's checking on your property at least once or twice a year. You need to check and see what your insurance policy says. I know mine, I have to check a box that says that we inspect at least twice a year for my insurance to be valid on my own rental properties, never mind my owners. So you need to check your insurance policy, and you need to see what it says, especially when it's vacant. So when the property is vacant, and let's just say, for an example, it's not a multifamily. So it's a one door property, whether it's a townhouse or an apartment condo style or single family house. There's certain things that you have to do when it's vacant. And if you live hours or provinces away, you need to make sure that somebody's doing this on your behalf, like checking on the property, turning the water off and clearing the water lines, which is winterizing, to make sure that your insurance is valid. So we have like a little sign-in list that is left on the kitchen counter. So every time somebody comes in, the date, time, signature, they checked out, all the windows and doors are good and the property's good. So whether you're driving to do it yourself or you're paying a neighbor to do it for you, which would not be fantastic.
I was just going to segue there. You took the thunder. I love it.
Yeah. So, this is why we need to create relationships with people around us. But it's super important. I don't think people understand this. You need to know what your insurance policy says, because if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, you risk not being covered.
Yeah. Especially with a major claim. And I think what you noted as well is not only you doing the checks on the timely fashion as required by your insurance policy, but you got a paper trail. So you have a little check-in list at the property that you want signed out. Maybe they respond in emails saying, yeah, I was at the house today. It all looks good. Here's the 3 things I checked, whatever. And, a gift card to, I guess, food these days because movie theaters aren't open, but, a good gift card to your neighbor who's in that city 3 hours away doing these checks for you is money well spent when you look at the alternative if you have to do it yourself or pay someone like a business to do the check, right? So
and same thing with snow removal. You have to think about snow removal. Who's going to do your city sidewalk? Yeah. So when a property is vacant, somebody's got to be doing the snow removal. Otherwise, you risk somebody slipping and falling and suing you, or the city fining you. So it's important to have all these things covered. Same with grass cutting if it gets too long. So if you have a vacancy of a couple of months and your grass is 6 feet high, that doesn't show very well.
Totally. Julie, you were going to jump into something there?
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to say, I think, when you're doing some of it on your own, like let's say you don't have a property management company, is find a person that you super trust that there's where the keys stay. A second set of keys need to stay in that area, simply because there's just going to be that one time you just cannot make it out there, and it's okay. And be it the neighbor. For myself, it was my realtor. My realtor just kept a set of keys for me. And it was great because I would just tell whoever it was, like, hey, the realtor wouldn't go meet them. They'd go to the realtor, they'd pick them up and off they'd go. So I think when I'm hearing Andrea say the stuff about, like, we don't concern ourselves with snow that much, but, cutting of the grass and all that, if I had that phone call from the neighbor saying like, hey, things aren't looking so good, then it's a quick and dirty, quick call to someone saying, hey, could you do me a favor? Can you go grab this? Can you just jump over there, go into the shed, the lawnmower's in there. And then, and then it's a discussion with the tenants later saying, hey, what happened? And one strategy I learned from one of our groups, Andrea, one of our mastermind groups, one of our participants made the comment that she puts out I think she keeps it in the beginning of her tenancy. It's a calendar that she gives people. And in the calendar, she has everything that needs to be getting done on the property. So this speaks to the point you made, Mackenzie, about about people not understanding what it is to own a home and how you maintenance it. And so I like that idea. I haven't implemented it yet, but I want to do it so that it's a text message, a reminder, like, hey, this, whatever the month might be, just a reminder. We had our first, no snowfall, but okay, we had our first snowfall. No, for Alberta, that really matters. Just a reminder that snow needs to be cleared within 24 hours and stuff like that. I think a gentle reminder especially, I had a group of tenants that were quite young, and that was not their priority. And their priority, they had way more. They have other priorities, but when I went and did the inspection, grass wasn't cut, and I was like, okay, we'll get you a weed whacker, and to show that I care too. But it's it's that bit about giving them that extra little nudge sometimes.
You made me think here too, Julia, as I kind of listened to the process. By doing these reminders and having that schedule up front, you understand expectations so they know what they're getting into. 2 is you've got these additional texts or messages following up. You've got a great paper trail you've built now of, hey, like, this is it, black and white. And if things get missed and you go down, if you have to unfortunately go down the road of perhaps a court or RTDRS, which is our form here in Alberta, of a lower, more informal court, it's not like you just sent the message once. Yeah, not like you communicated the message once on a phone call, but you've got 5 texts, 3 emails, and your schedule, your maintenance schedule, and a lease. So when you go to court, you're well prepared. You're going to win that case as well. And these are just fundamental things. If you do off the hop, it just makes things a lot easier should things go sideways, which I think is a good point you raised. I'm going to tackle some more comments here. So Lewis, I believe this is you on your Facebook accounts. When it comes to signing leases and docs between your tenants and you, either faxing or emailing them. Oh, I already answered this question. Sorry. Let's go to the next one here. Here's what it says. Any app or program that you suggest for people with small amounts of doors? I'll tackle this one. One out there is called HelloSign.com, and they allow you 3 free signings every month, which is perfect if you only have a few doors. And what you can do as well to not use all those entries up, so here's kind of a pro tech tip, is you actually compile all of your different documents into one file, so one Word document or one PDF. So then when you upload it to this free service, it only counts towards one of your free uses per month. Whereas if you wanted to get 3 things signed, like a lease agreement, a pet agreement, and I don't know, something else you might have, that might chew up all your free signings. But if you compile it into one document, you can get everything signed and it only costs you one of those freebies per month. So it's HelloSign.com. They're really good. It's easy to work. Sean is saying 100% DocuSign. He's a realtor, so I mean that's their bread and butter. It works very, very well. And then Sean, you also mentioned here, my insurance request, my tenants own renters insurance. My insurance request, my tenants, renters insurance policy number. Yeah, absolutely. We always request getting that confirmation insurance. Actually, one of the partners on the page, I'll do a quick segue here, a little bit of a partner promotion is New Air Insurance, and I know there's a few others out there too, but we partner with New Air. If you guys sign up to the program and you get your tenant to purchase renters insurance through New Era, what happens is they give you a unique code that you can give off to your tenant, and when they sign up for insurance, you get automatically emailed that they've signed up. You get automatically emailed a copy of the insurance policy, but which is really nice because it's all done. You don't have to chase your tenants or anything. But the really kind of nice kicker here is if they ever cancel their policy, you get automatically notified. So then you can be assured throughout that tenancy that they've got proper insurance coverage. Because nothing's worse than, and unfortunately, we see this, I won't say quite often, but definitely occasionally on our Facebook group, where something's happened and they don't have insurance. There was a lady that I think last week had a tenant melt half of the garage siding because the barbecue was too close. So,
yeah,
guys, it's
Mackenzie,
give her, yeah.
So just to speak to apps and whatnot. So I swear I don't work for Apple, but I do love the products. One new thing that I had done is I now get my emails on my MacBook, so that as I have these conversations, I then do screen shares. So right away, if I have a conversation with a tenant, instead of like doing little taking a photo of my screen, what I do is I'll just do a full screen share of what's on my MacBook. And then that goes into my files of here's some of the communication that I had with the tenant, or here's the pictures they sent me, or here's the picture from the handyman or whatever. This way I can keep all my documentation of what's been happening on my phone physically in a file. And so that's one little strategy that I use. And
can you repeat that again? I only caught half of that. So you're doing like a Zoom call and a screen share, and you're recording it, or what do you? No, how are you capturing all the information?
No. Basically, I've set up so that I could get my iMessages and I could get my text messages physically on my computer. It's a simple setup. It's a total simple setup. But what it does is it prevents me from having to be taking photos of my screen on my phone, because that's so small and then you have so many.
It's not very efficient. No,
exactly. So this way you're getting it all in one. And I've recently learned that there is an app that apparently can download all your text messages. It's
lots
a paid,
of those options out there.
It's a paid app, and that's something I absolutely want to move to from a point of efficiency as well. Very much so.
I'll add on that, and I'll answer that New Era insurance question. So I use both phones. I'm on Android currently, but when I was on Apple, there's a service called I think it's iMazing, and then amazing without the A, and it's like $30 or $40, but it backs up your entire phone. But more importantly, you can download all your text messages. You can have it run it automatically every time you plug in your phone in the computer, or over the Wi-Fi when you come home, as long as your computer is turned on and that backup application is running in the background. It will do timely backups without your anything. But the biggest thing is same thing, because I had a few tenancies in my earlier landlording years where because something could have gone sideways. We were on rocks per se. So I was starting to document in case I lost my phone. I had some very critical expectations and messaging going through on text. That seems to be the preferred communication. It's quick, it's easy.
Yeah.
And I was backing up the text messages that way. Melanie, it's New Era Insurance. There's a lady in our group. Her name's Courtney Johnson. What I'll do is, if you don't mind posting in the Facebook group, I'll follow up with you and give you our contact information. We do have a program with them on the insurance thing. And and same for you, Sean, as well, because I'm just catching up on the comments. Okay, sorry. Julia, what was the second and third tip you're going with there?
Oh, no, I was just going to, pile on the comment around the insurance. We just had tenants they gave notice, whatever. I got an email I had set it up like that too. I got an email from the insurance company saying, hey, such and such tenant has canceled their insurance as of this day, which was amazing because I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yep, he's supposed to. So I could kind of keep track of, yes, my tenant still has insurance versus no, my tenant didn't renew their insurance.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Something to be said. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying something to be said about like doing that extra step in the beginning, so that you're kind of finalizing that, hey, I'm in on it as well. Just like bills. Same thing, bills with the village or with the small local community. Yeah, I'll be on that bill as well, right? So that you know what's getting paid. That type of thing is imperative.
Yeah, and something too, I was just thinking here, and then we've mentioned this as well on previous episodes, is having your renters, making it a requirement to have renters insurance is so critical. One, by the way, in Alberta, it's not law. Tenants don't actually need to have insurance. But if you make it part of your lease, then it is binding. So it's dependent on you as the landlord to have that in your lease. So that's important. But number two, you guys cover a huge blind side of a liability if your renters have renters insurance. Because if they do something, they're at fault for a claim, can easily be in tens of thousands of dollars. It won't actually go in your home insurance policy. It'll go over to the renter's insurance policy, keeping your premiums down as well. So there's a lot of protection that may not be obvious, other than the tenant saying, well, why do I need it? I mean, I only have a couple $1,000s worth of belongings. My TV's worth the most. It's only $500. Well, there's a little bit more to it than that. So,
yeah.
Talking about bills. So, especially if you're a long distance landlord, you want to make sure that you sign up with the landlord program for both the heat and electric bills, in addition to your local water bills. Because again, if somebody cancels their utilities and they do the midnight move and you don't live around there and you don't know, you can, at least you know your heat and electric will go back into your name automatically. And so you're still going to have heat to your building, but it also twigs you that something's going on. Yeah. So I highly recommend to everyone out there, it doesn't cost anything to go on the landlord program. And it actually saves you money when they transition the bill back to you because they don't charge you that application fee again. So we have all our properties on the landlord program. So I know right away if something's going on and the bill comes back to me. Mm-hmm. So you need to make sure that the utility company is sending the bill to your address, not to the address of the rental property.
That's right.
Not the service address. Yeah, absolutely. You know, like this is a small little soapbox rant, and I'll keep it to about 10 seconds, is I really, really wish, and I asked this when I first signed up to become the IT guy, I'm like, is there a way I can get an automatic email notification or something when this bill switches over, instead of waiting a whole billing cycle to be like, hey, now I have a charge on my account, where did this come from, right? It would be great if the insurance companies or the utility companies would let us know if this transition happened. Again, it becomes an early warning indicator if something's going sideways in your tenancy.
Actually, if you're with Direct Energy, for example, I get an email from them that welcome to Direct Energy. So they do. If you sign up on the landlord program, you'll get a notification that they started billing you again. That
Interesting.
reopened your account. Yeah.
So I'll be fair. I only use NMAX here in Calgary, and I've been debating that should I go shop around, look for some different utility providers. But if I will look at Direct Energy, because if there's one out there that gives me that email notification, that's another ace in the pocket, so to speak, to protect yourself.
And you know what, Mackenzie, like you can't stop us now. You know what? I think you've nailed something too, because even with a bank, I actually switched banks because of the fact that they wouldn't, you know how automatic deposits to emails and this and that, whatever. One was like they were limiting how many emails I could have or how many could be deposited. And I was like, wait a second, this isn't efficient. So I think there's something to be said about contacting whoever your service providers are, the utilities, the banks, the trades people, whoever, and be like, okay, how do I do this so that everything can be automated right from the beginning? So I'm getting an email that says paid. Great. I don't need to go look in the account that the money's there because I already got a notification. And, you know, taking that little extra time to just set that up in the beginning, again, that organization piece I talked about is reams and reams of time saved of not chasing bills or not chasing the tenants for payment and all this type of thing. So I think there's something to be said about asking, like just not being afraid to ask and say, hey, how can I set this up? Because this is a rental property I have and my tenants are paying, but I want to ensure you get paid. And small places like locations that are like more like 1,000 people, or sometimes there's exceptions, right? They're like, oh, you can check on here, or you can. So I think there's something really important in when you're managing like that again, from an efficiency standpoint.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, and you know, you're right. Every plot, even though it's like a process that's pretty well known or documented, there's always these back doors, or some people know some secrets. Say in the bank or something, they can get something approved or something set up a bit differently without going through this official process, so to speak. And on your note, I'm already sensing the future shop talk theme around tech and efficiencies of doing things online. That is definitely my MO. I have automatic deposits. I have an email for each of my rental properties. And then that email goes to one auto deposit to one account. And I never ever touch e-transfers. I love on the first of the month going paid. 3 hours later, oh yeah, he always pays at 5. Done. Good. And I know all my rent comes in. And the same thing with my bookkeeper. She's brilliant. I've got rules. So some of the bookkeeping software that I use, if I get a invoice that comes in on an email, and if it's consistent every month and it's got the same subject line, I've set up an email rule to auto forward that into the accounting software, and then it all gets reconciled. And again, I don't touch anything. It's just like smooth sailing.
Yep. Yeah. No. You're speaking my language. I love that stuff. Yeah.
I haven't figured out the online portal without committing to a big software. I know, Andrea, you're a big fan of Buildium because it's got a maintenance request kind of interface. I'm trying to figure that out on a small scale for myself because again, I've only got a handful of doors. So any tech tips while we're on the side subject? Andrea, want to get your 2 cents in here?
So like you, I have different email addresses for my own portfolio so that everything to do with that rental property is going to that email address. And there's no personal stuff in there. It's just for the property. So and I would say that, Buildium does bill on a per door basis. So even if you only have 1 to 10 doors, it can still be very affordable.
And does Buildium connect to QuickBooks and stuff?
I believe so. Yes. I don't take care of the accounting side of things.
Right.
But yes.
Because that's also like, there's nothing better than like tech stuff is great, but once you have too many apps, then it gets a little bit nuts. So if you can find that one stop that kind of addresses several, that's ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And Melanie, totally agree with you. Yeah, tech tips equals good organization and efficiency. It is my MO. Maybe we'll do a special show on that, because I've got, from doing my due diligence up front to, there's so many things I've digitized and put online that just forces things to work in a certain way that makes things easier. So cool. Well, we are at 8:00. So fantastic conversation. Ladies, thanks for joining me. Oh, I want to do a quick shout out and say thank you. So funny story last weekend. Andrea knows this investor quite well. His name is Gord Eisler. He's out of Central Alberta. And anyways, my brother-in-law, I got family out of the Red Deer area right now, which is where I am. And I just picked up a motorhome. I'm doing some plumbing work, and my brother-in-law just became a plumber. And him and the guy that runs the company, awesome. That's Steve over at Adawick Plumbing out of Innisfail. Nice. We're in his yard working on my motorhome. And he says, like, oh, I got to run in this call. This investor's got a leak in his property. I'm like, oh, yeah. And got talking. He's got a bunch of doors out by Sylvan Lake and all this stuff. And I'm like, I bet you $5, one guess. I'll tell you right up front, I know who that is. And sure enough, it was Gord. So before he got over to Gord's rental property, I gave Gord a shout. I said, hey, how come you're not managing your properties any better? I hear you got a leak right now. He goes, how do you know this? Anyways, small world, small stories, but
it's all about community. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all about community. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyways, if you guys are in the Central Alberta area, you do need a plumber. You're close to Innisfail within reason. Steve's willing to drive. He charges one price, whether you have 100 doors or one door, super fair, honest, and a great guy. So just want to give that shout out. So at that point, let's wrap her up, and we got some thank yous coming in, and I haven't done this in a while. I need to get back on this. I want to give you guys both thanks for coming on and sharing your time. So I usually give you guys an opportunity to kind of promote a passion project, a business, anything that you're working on right now, and just to kind of share with the community. So Andrea, I know you've been through this first. I'll go to you, and then Julia, I'll go to you to share anything you've got on the go. So Andrea?
Oh gosh, it's been a while since we did this.
Yeah.
A passion project. I don't know. I'm coming to you from Cranbrook, so
there you go.
Project, but no, it's it's good to be able to connect with people in these trying times. So I appreciate the opportunity to share my knowledge with all of you, and hopefully you guys can learn something. So thanks for allowing me to contribute.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. And
okay, Julia, your turn.
Yeah. I'll ditto that. It's always a bonus to hear kind of real life scenarios, and and I'll throw a little plug in that Andrea started out as my mentor, and so it's pretty fantastic to be on the call with her and be doing projects with her and masterminding and all this type of stuff. So we really appreciate it, Mackenzie, because it's amazing how when you start asking questions, so much more comes out, and it's great if one tip can make a difference, it's worth it, right? So thank you.
Absolutely. If you can come away from an hour and have one thing that saves you that 15 minutes or an hour next month, that's a win right there, and that's kind of what we aim for. So ladies, guys, thank you so much for being awesome guests. It was a fun conversation. I've already got a show topic coming up for a future shop talk. Julia, I will have you back on the show, so thanks for committing. I haven't told you that yet, but now you know. And as always, Andrea, you're a wealth of information. I always appreciate you sharing that with our community members. Folks, that's it. That's another Shop Talk here in Alberta, the only show dedicated to landlord in Alberta, Alberta Landlord Shop Talk. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.